So it is U.S. Election season. It's always a painfully long season. Getting into the summer months, still months away, the election. But we've had a debate here, Peter, from Biden and Trump. Really shaky performance from Biden. And it does appear from the polling that it is Trump's election to lose. I think not only the presidency, but both houses of Congress. We know that's where the really impactful thing is. It's not just who becomes president. It's if they have both houses of Congress on their side. So anything you're seeing in the markets here that's sort of linked to this whole cycle of the presidential election?
Well, as you indicate, John, the clear takeaway from a lot of political commentators across the spectrum in the US is that there was a clear victory for Trump. I would say based on that fact and the way the immediate market reaction has been, which is positive, suggests that, compared to when he ran for office the first time, where there was a lot of volatility around Trump because who was he, what were we to expect? This time around, it seems like the market is pretty calm, and I would say leaning positively because we know he would like to cut taxes, which would be positive for the equity market.
What's your assessment, though? I mean, we have that big supply side stimulus we saw after the 2016 election when they knew he was going to get both houses of Congress. He was able to do these dramatic cuts. Is the net effect, it seems hard to me to drum up as large a net effect as there was back then. I mean, corporate taxes can only be cut by so much.
Yeah, I would say the landscape, the situation is completely different from 2020 and especially 2016. We have a U.S. government that is running the largest deficit in modern history on a sustained basis, around 7% of nominal GDP. Debt to GDP levels are really historically high as well for the U.S. So it is difficult to do supply side economics. I don't know how he's going to pull that off, but so we'll have to see. But I think we've talked about that in one of our previous conversations, that if Trump wins, I think one of the key things we can say with certainty is that it will be a boost for the European defense industry, because it seems like Trump, he wants to reduce the military umbrella of the US in the world.
And that could be an impact on NATO, and obviously it means that Europe is on its own, will feel increasingly isolated as it felt, I think, during Trump's first presidency. But looping back a little bit to that comment on the fiscal side, we saw a Biden victory in 2017, fiscal irresponsibility. We saw a Biden victory in 2021, or 2020 comes to power in 2021, both seeing an equal fiscal, not equal, but very large levels of willingness to expand the fiscal deficits, of course, post-pandemic in Biden's case. But there is this industrial policy angle that we haven't seen since World War II. Don't both candidates add up to inflation ahead?
I think both candidates will lead to inflation. I think, and I think if Trump wins, then we discussed this. The military budget would Trump actually potentially cut into that to make room for other priorities on the fiscal side. I don't think that can be excluded at all. But it's an interesting setup as well, this election, because if you look at the economic results and you look at history, Biden should be leading much more in the polls and should be a much more clear winner as a candidate. But that's not what we're seeing in the polls. Just before the first presidential debate, it was really a close tie.
But we also know from both cycles recently that the polls are an art more than they are a science, and increasingly so because as the generation that is young gets older now and is less on phones and is more hard to reach with these polling techniques, it feels like we don't really know necessarily what's going on until Election Day. And really, it's after this performance by Biden at the debates, it's really a question of, I think, for the Democratic Party, is this their candidate? Can they drum up somebody else to take the helm between now and this convention we have later on and slightly after mid-August? That is the existential question, I think, for the Democratic case in this election. Otherwise, it looks like we're sort of stumbling towards another Trump presidency. So remember to come back to the U.S. election page to see our updates on our thoughts as we head towards this really historic election. It seems like every election cycle these days is historic, and I think this will be no exception.